So, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here. I am the last speaker before our Q&A session, so I'll try to make it efficient. Today I'm going to be presenting some work. It's going to be a little bit different than I think some of the other talks in that it's a little bit more preliminary. We're kind of just starting off. I'm going to be talking about quantifying the economic value of fuel breaks in Southern California Chaparral. And this is actually work I'm doing together with Jeff Hayes and also Jose Sanchez, who's also a research economist at Pacific Southwest Research Station, and David Weiss, who has an extensive background in fire. So let's get into it right after. There we go. So this research project is centered around fuel breaks. They play an important role, as many of you I'm sure already know, in managing wildfire and chaparral ecosystems. They provide breaks in fuels to stop or slow fire spread and provide access for firefighting staff during incidents. They provide extra time and protection for nearby communities, resources, and other kinds of assets. Here we go. Yeah, and then this is a photo of a prescribed fire on the Palomar Ranger District that the Cleveland National Forest put on the website formerly known as Twitter. This is the Ramona fuel break. These fuel breaks typically involve lots of investment over long periods of time in order to maintain. Let's see. And are associated with a couple things. So sometimes they're associated, so I think originally some of us went into this thinking, okay, well, the fuel breaks are gonna kind of make it more accessible to fight fires. But as many of you know, having more fuel breaks means you have more areas to staff, which means you can increase the suppression costs, but you're fighting the fire more efficiently. There's the potential for environmental damages associated with constructing and maintaining the fuel breaks. But then you also may have a lower expected losses of life property and asset values. So as an economics problem, this is sort of interesting, right? Because you have basically you're paying a cost in that it may be costly to build and maintain the fuel break network. It may actually increase the suppression costs in such that you can deploy more people. And there may be some associated environmental damages. But as a result, if there is a fire that occurs, there may be a benefit to having it in that it could slow the spread of the fire. It could change the timing of the response, and it can decrease the expected losses of life, property, and asset values. And so the main goal of this research is to really dive into this trade-off and really develop a framework and a methodology for assessing, how we think about these trade-offs in terms of economic values. And then here's firefighters on the Williams fire near Glendora. So this was up on an NBC article. Right. So key to this, so there's a couple important concepts here. One important concept that we heard about earlier when we were talking about EcoServe, which was a fantastic presentation, are ecosystem services. So we want to consider in this project, one of the things that we want to consider are trade-offs related to ecosystem services. Just a quick definition here. Ecosystem services are the direct and indirect benefits that ecosystems provide humans. So this is a pretty important point. So it's benefits to human communities. Fuel breaks, as I mentioned before, might reduce ecosystem services sometimes, but might increase expected ecosystem services over time, depending on the effects they have on the fire fire response. So there's an open question though related to ecosystem services, and we heard a little bit about it in EcoServe, which is what ecosystem services to consider. As I mentioned before, this is sort of a preliminary talk. We're just getting started with the project, so you're going to encounter a lot of open-ended questions that I hope to get feedback on. So one of those is which ecosystem services to consider. So the Forest Service and others regularly engage in ecosystem service assessments of their landscapes. And this is always sort of a point that gets brought up, which is, what do you actually put in the basket and why? So do you only consider water and carbon? Do you consider biodiversity? Do you consider recreation? And then how should we measure them? What metrics are important to measuring them? Anyway, just rehashing some of the research goals of this project. We want to estimate the impacts of field break networks on expected costs and damages associated with wildfire and suppression. So we want to generate a reproducible modeling framework for estimating the economic value associated with investments in field break networks. So we want to be able to have a way of analyzing trade-offs. And then the economic values will be calculated to help possibly facilitate decision support for reducing the risk of wildfires and for generating metrics for financially supporting field break networks, possibly through conservation finance. So one of the benefits of assessing these in terms of economic values is if you do the calculation correctly, you may have a way of connecting some of these treatments to conservation finance. But that's another maybe 3 sets of talks. So what is this project going to look like? So this is the little flow chart. Thank you. Yeah, this is a little flow chart. So we want to build a set of field break network maps, which include ample variation in the field break maps in order to get at variation in fire behavior on the landscape. The field break maps are going to be fed into a model of fire suppression. So we're going to be calculating essentially expected suppression associated with, so basically the way to think about it is suppression potential associated with each field break map. That's going to be modeled using a fire behavior model. And then the suppression and field break costs are going to be analyzed using past data on field break costs. We're going to calculate damages from fire, and we're going to combine these two in order to get at expected costs for each potential field break scenario. Characterizing field breaks. So this is the Southern Wildfire Crisis Strategy landscape here, which I got from their website. So we want to use established field break networks and the 4 adaptive management service enterprise team strategic field break assessments in order to generate alternative field break networks. This is going to be done by selecting the portions of the field break network which will be maintained and those that will not. And initially, the alternative field break networks will be based also on expert input from the 4 forests. So there is going to be sort of a session of collecting input from each forest in order to figure out what field break networks to look at. For each of these alternatives, there's going to be a static suppression action layer that will be generated. So the way to think about this is that basically the layer is going to be static. So for each field break network, our plan is to have what I might characterize as a potential suppression layer. And then when you put that into the fire behavior model, which is somewhere here. Thanks. Hold on. Yeah, this is the same slide. Once you put this into the fire behavior model, the suppression will only activate if the fire actually reaches the field break. So that's a little bit too much modeling. So I'll move on to the fuel costs. The suppression costs are going to be based on a data set of costs which are currently invested in initial attack associated with fires that are class D or smaller. And so this is a data set that has that we're looking to build with existing data that we have. And we have some data on fires with larger costs as well. So the damages from fire, I've got maybe like a minute left, I promise. In order to calculate the economic damages, we will follow sort of established Forest Service protocol for avoided cost methodology that's laid out in some general technical reports, specifically General Technical Report 315 from the Rocky Mountain Research Rocky Mountain Research Center. So we're going to work to look at the impacts of not just ecosystem services, but structures and infrastructure and human populations. We've already started some of this work, so preliminary economic values of avoided structure loss from implemented WCS landscapes have already been calculated for the Southern California WCS landscape. It's important to note that the duration of the project is long, but we have fire modeling for 2 years of implemented projects. And then the methodologies and assumptions are still being vetted, but preliminary results suggest a positive ROI for the investments that have already been done. Part of the point of this is just to look at using housing and structure data in the landscape. We have spatially explicit structure data from the Army Corps of Engineers. So, in conclusion, the goal of this project is to estimate the economic values and costs associated with fuel break networks. Not only will we be cataloging the economic values, we are working to extend expected cost frameworks already used by the Forest Service. So ideally, we want, at the end of this project, one thing that we want to achieve is that we'd like to merge some of the expected cost calculations and some of the methodologies with frameworks that are already being developed to look at the values associated with natural capital accounting. And sort of incorporating some of the work we've done on natural capital accounting, not just to look at these assets from an accounting perspective, but also from a perspective of change. Anyway, that's it for me. Thanks a bunch.